So I just got this book a couple days ago, and it was the one that I mentioned in the Lindsey Williams summary that his elite friend told him to get, by Jonathan Cahn. I forget the title of it now, but it's something. He's got a few books, and it all focuses on cycles and things like that. And this one's about the Shemitah cycle, which I've mentioned again in the summary of the Lindsey Williams video, and I've mentioned it a couple other times here recently. I forget the title of this book right now, but it's something about like the Shemitah or the, something like that. So I just started reading it. Nowhere near done, haven't even read half of it yet. But it is definitely interesting, and it made me want to come out here and do a video on the way to work today to just kind of go over some things. He shows historical charts and things of that nature that show, like, okay, well, this was the year of the Shemitah, the 7-year cycle. We had one of the worst stock market collapses, ever in America on this date. And then we had, some other type of collapse. Wasn't a market collapse, some kind of economic problem on the, notable in the history books kind of thing on this date. And the key thing here is that it's always been related, or like literally, if it was not on the exact date of this thing, this cycle, it was like, I don't know, a month or like, because what I'm finding out is, for example, like there's a window, right, of let's just call it a month roughly, of, well, here's the first day of this particular cycle, and then the end of the cycle ends on, on this date. Let's just say it's a month. And it's the most important part is this, from what I think I'm reading, is the end of that cycle. And that's when most of these things have happened, historically speaking. But not all. Some of them happen during that window, so let's just, again, it's like a 30-day period or so. If you take that into consideration, it's incredible how, I guess, accurate or whatever that this cycle is in relation to major downturns, whether it be stock market or the economy, etc. And one thing I want to remind you of, based off these cycles and all the ones he mentioned, is that just because the date, and let's just say that this last cycle that's coming up in September-October timeframe, let's just say it's absolutely the big collapse, derivatives are going to melt down, all that stuff happens. That doesn't mean on the stroke of midnight that all of a sudden the worst of the worst has happened, and the next day, the Dow Jones was at 18,000 and now it's down to 5,000 just in a day or even a week. These other cycles that I've sat here and read through his book, which I haven't read all of them, but he pointed out a number of them. They all appear to be the start of a decline, whether it be the economy itself, the stock market, and usually if the stock market goes down, the economy shortly thereafter follows. So they kind of go hand in hand. But a lot of times, like, you can look a year or so out from that stroke of midnight, so to speak, and when this thing happens, and say, oh well, the worst actually wasn't for 4 months later or 6 months later or whatever. But it definitely, you could see just from the chart anyways, that, okay, yeah, you can see the decline start right here, and then it ended down here, way down, but it would, again, it happened 3, 4, 5, 6 months later total, in totality. So just keep that in mind. But the thing that for me that's really interesting about this one is because he says, look, this is a 7-year cycle. It happens fairly frequently. So if you think about it, well, then why this one, this 2015 September, October time frame, ended the 7-year cycle? Why is this one, or why should we think this one's going to be any more different or worse, etc., than any of the other ones? And the last, 2008 was the last, 2007, 2008 was the last cycle. Well, what about the one before that? Okay, we had the dot-com bubble. But if you look back to those days, did it seem like Great Depression horrible? No. But see, this time we do have these derivatives products. They are the most expensive thing, so to speak, in the entire world. When you combine them and say, okay, well, I think Deutsche Bank itself, one of the too big to fail overseas banks, has somewhere around $75 trillion in derivatives. And again, I can't fathom, I can't understand how, because they say, well, these are, we have $75 trillion in quote-unquote assets. Okay, well, you're referring to derivatives. Yeah. So you have $75 trillion in derivative quote-unquote assets. And what is a derivative? A derivative is a bet on another asset, how it's going to perform. So basically, you're watching people gamble, and you're standing on the sidelines, gambling, making bets on the side. Except your bets on the side exceed way more than the actual thing you're betting on. So it's like, I am going to bet $20 on this horse race. And everyone else standing over here on the sidelines, which is a bunch of really high rollers, really rich guys, are betting amongst themselves on how my bet is going to perform. My bet's only $20. But because there's 200 of these rich men over here, they're into the millions of dollars, so to speak, little example, on how I'm going to perform. And all I'm doing is making a simple yes or no bet. Either this horse is winning or it's not. So that means they're betting, either some of them are going to bet that I am going to win, and some of them are going to bet that I won't win. The problem is, for each person that bets that I will win, there has to be an opposite bet by one of those guys that I won't win. So let's just say there's 10 of them, then that means 5 are voting, betting that I win, 5 are betting that I don't win. And here's the craziest part about this. Imagine those men being able to bet without a damn dollar in their pocket. Or a fraction of a percent of the money in full that they're actually betting on. So while they've each individually bet, let's say $1 million, they only had to come up with $1,000 to play with that million. So on paper, they have $1 million bets. So what happens when some of those bets become losers and I actually win, right? Let's say I win my bet, therefore 5 of them are happy, the other 5 are unhappy. How are the 5 going to get their money when none of the other ones had it to begin with? Okay, that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is, well, the 5 that lost, that owe the money, how are they going to get the money to pay the 5 that won? Well, that's the other. That's it. That is the problem. That's how the other guys were expecting their money. And since they all bet on the same thing, these 5, they all lost, and they all wrote insurance contracts to each other, stating that if anybody is playing this betting game and loses, you're paying us a small fee. I'll insure your bet. So if you lose, I'll come up with the money. And if I lose, I have insurance through this guy standing next to me, who's also betting, by the way. And he has insurance through the next guy standing next to him, which also was one of the 5 that was betting and lost. So you can kind of see, well, none of them are going to have the money to pay the other guy, which is going to cause a daisy chain reaction. So the people who are owed the money aren't going to get paid. The people who lost the money don't have the money to pay. And everyone just files for bankruptcy because they don't have it. So again, that's how you have $75 trillion on assets on paper. Because they're nothing more than bets, and you claiming, well, these bets are worth $75 trillion. Okay, but did you actually come up with 75? I mean, normally when you buy something, don't you have to buy it with money? Like, don't you have to have the money to say I own that? Or do you just get to write on paper that you've got this thing worth a whole lot of money, but if anyone ever comes and checks or wants to deal with that, you just go belly up and go bankrupt and cause a daisy chain reaction throughout the whole damn financial industry. Right, so that, my friends, is why this time might be a little different than some of the other economic collapses. We have the 4 blood moon extremely rare cycle that only happens, they said that this particular set of blood moons, in the fashion that they've come in a year, 4 of them, whatever, and we have this weird solar eclipse that just happened a few days ago, right in the middle of these cycles. They say that this thing happened only 7 times since basically Christ. And this is going to be the beginning or new 8th one. So if we're always talking about cycles of 7, which is what this is about, and you remember Christine Lagarde, head of the IMF, talking very crazily about cycles of 7 one day and before she gave her speech, which was disturbing. In the not so recent future, you know, it was fairly recently or whatever. So you take all that in consideration and say, well, when do those cycles and the blood moons and all these cycles end? Oh, September, October, the Shemitah, all of it, same time frame. And historically, it was a time period where debts were wiped away, wiped off the face of the earth at the end of that 7-year cycle. The problem is, I don't know if they're including you. I don't know that you get to wipe off your debt. But the club does get to wipe off its debt and is going to wipe off its debt. Those derivatives products and everything attached to them is going to be wiped off. And with it will go the stock market. And as Lindsey Williams said, if there's anything on a piece of paper that you own that you think is an asset, it is not going to be worth the paper it was printed on. Gold and silver will be the only thing remaining left that will be standing. Which is why he said numerous times, and his elite friend told him numerous times, that is our money. That's what we use, Lindsey. Paper stuff is for you, basically you guys, the sheeple. So, as a fly on the wall, I decided I think I'm going to do the same thing as these guys. So it's all going to be timed. I still strongly believe that they will pull that trigger, so to speak, on the economy and the derivatives products at the end of this year, September, October time frame. I truly believe it, because they can't well, let's try next year because, well, the blood moon cycles aren't happening next year. The Shemitah doesn't happen next year, right? These guys do it on their cyclical terms, so to speak. I've just noticed recently the euro to US dollar index, which at some point, you know, the euro was $1.30, $1.20 to our dollar. So if you bought anything in the UK or with euros and you had to convert your currency from American dollars to that, whether you're online or whatever, if something that you thought was $100 here, it was 120 something over there. Therefore, that's what you paid to get that thing over here. It is almost on par with the dollar right now. Literally almost. This smidgen close to being 1-to-1. So we have this great, enormous US dollar rally. And I remember, once again, what did Lindsey Williams say? Watch the euro. When that euro starts to go down and you see that trouble happen over there, it's going to happen in the UK zone first. You only have a matter of weeks to get your financial house in order here in America. Now, I don't know that this is particularly that exact thing where, hey, the euro actually is collapsing against the dollar. He said that was going to happen, but we'd have a few weeks. But he did not say that specifically just the euro would come down in value, which in honesty, it's our dollar rising in value. Again, they control all these markets, so it just, one goes up, the other goes down, they just do it when they feel like it. And they're doing this now. So, if that's the beginning of this problem, which, I mean, clearly we have an issue here, we can have a full-on collapse in the Eurozone, followed by it coming to America later on in this year after the derivatives crisis. Maybe it'll won't physically happen until 2016. But I feel like I can say, be rest assured, it's going to start in September and October. It has to. Take care.